Have you ever wondered what it feels like to be treated like unwanted furniture in your own daughter's home? I'm Beatrice Callahan, and last winter, I found myself sleeping on my daughter's lumpy couch while her in-laws enjoyed the guest room upstairs. But when I discovered something shocking about their mortgage situation, everything changed. What I did next had them calling me within hours, begging for forgiveness. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. To understand how I ended up purchasing my own daughter's mortgage from the bank, you need to know about the phone call that started it all. It was 3 days before Christmas when Mallory called me at my apartment in Bridgewater, Connecticut. Her voice had that artificial sweetness she'd developed after marrying Preston Blackwood III. You know, the kind that makes your teeth hurt. "Mother, wonderful news! Preston's parents are flying in from Switzerland for the holidays. We're hosting Christmas dinner this year." She paused for exactly 2 seconds before adding, "You're coming, aren't you?" Of course I was coming. Since Mallory's father died 6 years ago, I hadn't missed a single Christmas with my only child. I started packing immediately, carefully wrapping the antique pearl necklace I'd saved for my granddaughter Adelaide's 16th birthday, which happened to fall on Christmas Day. The drive from my modest apartment to their house in Windham Hills took 2 hours through heavy snow. As I pulled up to their colonial-style house, the one with the circular driveway and those pretentious marble lions flanking the entrance, I noticed Preston's parents' rental car already there. Bertram and Vivian Blackwood had arrived early. Mallory opened the door wearing designer cashmere and a strained smile. "Mother, you made it! Come in, come in! Preston, help Mother with her bags." That's when I noticed all the bedrooms upstairs were lit up. Strange, since they had 4 bedrooms, and only Adelaide lived at home. As Preston struggled with my suitcase, the man couldn't lift a 20-pound bag without turning red, Mallory was already guiding me past the staircase. "We've set up the most comfortable spot for you in the den," she said, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The den, also known as the family room, also known as the room with the television, PlayStation, and yes, the couch. I thought, "I'd be in the blue guest room like always," I said. "Oh well, Preston's parents are in there. They need a proper bed, you understand. Vivian has her back problems from all those years of tennis." "And the other guest room? The yellow one?" "That's for Preston Jr. He's driving down from Yale tomorrow." "What about—" "And Clarissa's in Adelaide's room. They're sharing. Sisters, you know how it is." Clarissa was Preston's sister, a 34-year-old fashion blogger who spent most of her time photographing herself in expensive clothes. I looked at the den's pull-out couch with its sagging cushions and the throw pillow that said, "Live, laugh, love" in cursive. This would be my bed for the next week. "Of course," I said. "I understand completely." That night, as I lay on the couch that squeaked every time I moved, I could hear Vivian's laughter drifting down from the guest room. The blue guest room had an ensuite bathroom, a queen bed with a memory foam mattress, and blackout curtains. I knew this because I'd helped Mallory choose them 3 years ago. Instead, I was sleeping 12 feet from the kitchen, with no door for privacy, sharing the powder room with everyone who came downstairs. At 2 in the morning, when Preston Jr. arrived from Yale, he flipped on all the lights to make himself a sandwich. At 6, Vivian came down for her morning yoga, setting up her mat 3 feet from my makeshift bed. "Oh, Beatrice! I didn't realize you were here," she said, though we'd spent the entire previous evening together. "Don't mind me. I'll just do my sun salutations quietly." The next 3 days established a pattern. I was the first awake. Hard not to be when you're sleeping in the household's main thoroughfare, and the last to find any privacy. Adelaide, my sweet granddaughter, was the only one who seemed to notice. "Gran, why don't you take my room?" she offered on the second day. "I can sleep down here." "Absolutely not," Mallory cut in before I could answer. "Your grandmother is perfectly comfortable. aren't you, Mother?" What could I say? I smiled and nodded. On Christmas Eve, while preparing dinner in Mallory's spotless kitchen, I overheard a conversation that changed everything. Preston and his father were in the study, and Bertram's voice carried through the heating vents. "Son, I'm concerned about your mortgage situation." "It's under control, Dad." "Under control? You're 3 months behind. The bank's sending notices." "It's just a temporary setback. The bonus from the Henderson account didn't come through like we expected." My hand stilled over the potato I was peeling. 3 months behind on their mortgage? "You need to ask Vivienne and me for help," Bertram continued. "We can't. Mallory would rather die than admit we're having money troubles." "What about her?" "Mother?" Preston laughed. "Beatrice? She lives in a rental apartment and drives a 10-year-old Honda. What could she possibly do?" That night, while everyone else enjoyed cognac in the living room, I slipped away to the den and made a phone call to my financial advisor, Harold Worthington. "Beatrice, Merry Christmas Eve," he said. "Checking on your portfolio?" "Actually, Harold, I have an unusual question. Is it possible to purchase someone's mortgage from a bank?" There was a pause. "Well, yes. Banks often sell distressed mortgages to investors, but it's typically done in large packages, not individual homes." "What if someone had significant resources? Could they purchase a specific mortgage?" "With the right connections and capital, certainly. The bank would probably be happy to offload a troubled loan." "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. By the way, how much liquid capital could I access from my accounts within, say, 48 hours? "Let me check." I heard him typing. "Well, without touching your main retirement funds, you could access approximately $8 million from your money market and investment accounts." "Perfect. Enjoy your evening, Harold." You see, what Preston didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Bennett Callahan, my late husband, had been a very successful patent attorney. More specifically, he'd handled the intellectual property rights for a small technology company in the 1990s that later became one of the largest software firms in the world. When Bennett died, I inherited his shares. I'd been living modestly by choice, not necessity. The next morning was Christmas. I was up at dawn as usual since Preston Jr. had decided to play video games until 3 a.m. in the den. I made coffee for the household and started preparing the Christmas breakfast casserole. It was Adelaide's favorite, the same one I'd made since she was little. As everyone gathered for presents, I noticed the difference in how gifts were distributed. Bertram and Vivienne gave Preston and Mallory matching Cartier watches. Preston Jr. received a new MacBook. Clarissa got a Louis Vuitton handbag. Even Adelaide opened a check for $5,000 for her 16th birthday. When it came time for my gift from Mallory and Preston, I received a $50 gift card to Target. "For whatever little things you might need around your apartment," Mallory explained. I smiled and thanked them, then handed Adelaide her present. As she opened the antique pearls that had belonged to my grandmother, Vivienne leaned over to whisper loudly to Clarissa, "Oh, those look rather vintage, don't they?" Adelaide, bless her heart, clasped them on immediately. "They're beautiful, Gran. I'll treasure them forever." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. After breakfast, while the family lounged in their Christmas finery, I excused myself to make another phone call. This time to Roman Medvedev, a real estate attorney I knew through Bennett's old firm. "Beatrice, Merry Christmas," Roman said. "What can I do for you on this holiday?" "Roman, I need you to find out which bank holds the mortgage for a property in Wyndham Hills. The owners are Preston and Mallory Blackwood." I gave him the address. "Are you looking to invest in distressed properties now?" "Something like that. How quickly can you work on this?" "For you, I'll make some calls tomorrow. Banks are funny about individual mortgage sales, but with your resources, they'll listen." That evening, the Blackwoods hosted a Christmas dinner for 30 of their closest friends. I spent 6 hours in the kitchen preparing beef Wellington, roasted vegetables, and 3 different desserts. The hired servers Mallory had promised never showed up. Apparently, she'd forgotten to confirm the booking. As I brought out the food, I overheard Vivian telling their friends, "Yes, Beatrice is such a help." She insisted on staying in the den to be closer to the kitchen. So practical, really. Meanwhile, Mallory was regaling her guests with stories about their upcoming renovations. "We're thinking of adding a conservatory off the master suite. Preston says it's a bit extravagant, but you only live once, right?" I bit my tongue and continued serving. 2 days after Christmas, Roman called back. "I've got good news. The mortgage is held by First Columbia Bank, and they're very interested in selling. The Blackwoods are technically in default. The bank was about to start foreclosure proceedings after New Year's." "How much?" "The outstanding balance is $1, $7 million, but the bank will sell it to you for $1, $4 million. They'd rather have guaranteed cash than go through foreclosure." "Do it." "You're sure? This is a significant sum?" "Roman, I've just spent a week sleeping on a couch while being treated like hired help in my daughter's home." "Yes, I'm sure." The papers were signed electronically within 48 hours. On December 29th, I became the official holder of my daughter's mortgage. I said nothing, just continued my stay on the couch, enduring Vivian's morning yoga and Preston Jr.'s late-night gaming sessions. On New Year's Eve, the Blackwoods threw another party. Once again, I was in the kitchen, preparing appetizers and managing the caterers, who actually showed up this time. As midnight approached, Preston raised a champagne toast. "To 2024, he declared. "To new beginnings, prosperity, and keeping up with the Blackwoods." Everyone laughed and clinked glasses. I smiled, said nothing, and headed to the kitchen to start the cleanup. I had my own toast in mind, but it would wait until morning. On New Year's Day, I woke early as usual, showered in the powder room, and prepared a full breakfast for the household. Then I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and waited. One by one, they trickled in, Preston Jr. looking hungover, Vivian in her silk robe, Bertram already checking his phone, Clarissa taking selfies even at breakfast, and finally, Preston and Mallory. "Mother, you're up early," Mallory said, pouring herself coffee. "Actually, I've been up for a while. I have an announcement to make." Preston barely looked up from his Wall Street Journal. "If this is about staying longer, Beatrice, we really need to discuss—" "No, it's not about staying longer. It's about your mortgage." The room went silent. Preston lowered his newspaper. "What about our mortgage?" Mallory asked, her voice tight. "Well, as of December 29th, I own it." You could have heard a pin drop. Preston's face went from confused to pale in seconds. That's impossible," he stammered. "Actually, it's quite possible. Banks are surprisingly willing to sell distressed mortgages to qualified buyers, and I, it turns out, am very qualified." "Mother, what are you talking about?" Mallory's coffee cup rattled against its saucer. "I'm talking about the fact that you're 3 months behind on your payments. I'm talking about the fact that while you were serving me a $50 Target gift card and putting me on a couch, you were about to lose this house. I'm talking about the fact that I now hold the mortgage on your home." Vivian gasped. Bertram's phone clattered onto the table. Preston Jr. actually looked up from his Instagram feed. Preston found his voice first. You can't? How did I afford it?" "Darling, your assumption that I'm poor because I choose to live modestly was your first mistake. Bennett left me quite comfortable. I simply don't feel the need to display it with marble lions and designer cashmere." I took a sip of coffee, letting that sink in. "Now, as your mortgage holder, I have some terms to discuss. First, you'll be making your payments to me directly. They're due on the 1st of each month, and I don't accept late payments. Second, I'll be conducting quarterly inspections of the property. It is my investment, after all. This is outrageous, Mallory exploded. You can't just— Actually, I can, and I have. I stood up, gathering my dishes. Oh, and one more thing. I'll be staying in the blue guest room for the remainder of my visit. Vivian, I believe. You'll find the couch quite comfortable. It's had a week to adjust to body weight, so those springs shouldn't squeak too much. I started toward the stairs, then turned back. Adelaide, darling, would you like to help your gran move her things? Upstairs? As Adelaide jumped up eagerly, I addressed the stunned room one more time. I'll expect the January payment on the 1st. Cash or certified check only. And Preston? You might want to call that Henderson account about your bonus. You're going to need it. The blue guest room was just as comfortable as I remembered. The memory foam mattress cradled my tired body, and the blackout curtains blocked the morning sun. From downstairs, I could hear frantic whispered conversations and the occasional raised voice. After an hour, there was a knock on my door. Come, in Adelaide. My granddaughter peeked in, eyes wide. Gran, Mom and Dad want to talk to you. They're in the study. Are they now? I patted the bed beside me. Tell me something first. Did you know about your parents' financial troubles? She bit her lip. I heard them arguing sometimes. Mom kept buying things, and Dad kept saying we couldn't afford it. But I didn't know it was this bad. And how do you feel about what I've done? Adelaide sat down beside me. I think it's kind of awesome. Is that wrong? I hugged her. No, darling, it's not wrong at all. In the study, Preston and Mallory sat side by side on the leather sofa, looking like chastened children. The arrogance had drained from Preston's face, and Mallory's designer cashmere was wrinkled from anxious fidgeting. Mother, Mallory began, we need to discuss this situation. Indeed we do. I took Preston's usual seat behind the desk. I believe you owe me $47,000 for the missed payments, plus this month's payment of $11,500. When can I expect that? Be reasonable, Beatrice, Preston said. You can't possibly expect. I expect exactly what any mortgage holder would expect. Payment in full, on time, every month. If you can't manage that, I'll have to consider other options. What other options? Mallory asked fearfully. Well, I could sell the mortgage to another investor, or I could foreclose. This is a business arrangement now. Business? We're family. Interesting that you remember that now. Tell me, Mallory, what kind of family puts their mother on a couch for a week while giving the guest rooms to everyone else? What kind of family treats their mother like kitchen help while bragging about renovations they can't afford? Mallory flushed. We were just trying to accommodate everyone. No, you were trying to maintain appearances, to keep up with the Blackwoods, as Preston so eloquently put it last night. Well, now you need to face reality. Preston cleared his throat. What if we can't make the payments? Then you'll have to sell the house and downsize. Live within your means. Novel. Concept, I know. You wouldn't really foreclose on your own daughter, Mallory said, tears forming in her eyes. Wouldn't I? You were content to let me sleep on a couch indefinitely. You were happy to take my help in the kitchen while telling your friends I insisted on staying in the den. You gave me a $50 gift card while wearing a $3,000 watch. So yes, Mallory, I absolutely would foreclose if necessary. The tears began to fall. How could you do this to us? How could you do this to yourselves? You're drowning in debt while throwing parties and planning conservatories. Did you think the bank would just forget about the mortgage? We were handling it, Preston muttered, by ignoring foreclosure notices, by lying to your parents about your finances, by pretending everything was fine while you sank deeper into debt. That's not handling it, Preston. That's denial. I stood up. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to cut your expenses dramatically. No more parties, No more renovations. No more designer clothes. You're going to pay me every month, on time. And you're going to treat people with respect, regardless of what you think their bank balance is. And if we don't, Preston challenged, then you'll learn what it's like to sleep on someone else's couch. I left them in the study and went to find Adelaide. She was in her room, still wearing the antique pearls. Gran? Are you really going to take our house? Only if your parents don't change their ways. Sometimes, Adelaide, people need a wake-up call. Your parents have been living in a fantasy world, spending money they don't have to impress people who don't matter. It's time they learned what's really valuable. Like family? Exactly like family. Real family, not the kind you perform for guests. That evening, dinner was subdued. Vivian and Bertram had suddenly remembered urgent business in Switzerland. Preston Jr. decided to return to Yale early. Clarissa booked a flight to New York, claiming she had a fashion emergency. As they all scattered, I sat with Adelaide in the kitchen, teaching her how to make her favorite breakfast casserole. Gran? She asked, cracking eggs into a bowl. Will you teach me about money management? I thought you'd never ask. We spent the evening discussing the difference between wants and needs, the importance of living within your means, and the power of compound interest. It was the most valuable gift I could give her. The next morning, I prepared to leave. As I packed my bags, Mallory appeared in the doorway of the blue guest room. Mother. Beatrice. I'm sorry. I don't even know where to begin. You can begin by being honest. With yourself, with Preston, and with me. Why did you put me on the couch? She sank onto the bed. Preston's family. They've always made me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I married up. I guess I was trying so hard to prove I belonged that I forgot where I came from. And where did you come from, Mallory? From you. From a mother who worked 2 jobs to put me through college. From a father who wore the same shoes for 5 years so I could have dance lessons. From parents who taught me that character matters more than appearances. But somewhere along the way, you forgot those lessons. I did, and I'm ashamed. She looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. Can you ever forgive me? Forgiveness isn't the issue, Mallory. The issue is whether you're going to change. Are you ready to stop living this facade? I don't know how. We're so deep in debt. Then let me help. Not by giving you money, but by teaching you what your father and I apparently failed to teach you the first time. How to budget, how to save, how to live authentically. You'd do that? After how we treated you. You're my daughter. That doesn't change, even when you disappoint me. We spent the next 3 hours creating a realistic budget. I showed her how to track expenses, how to negotiate with creditors, and how to distinguish between essential and discretionary spending. By the time we finished, she had a plan to pay off their debts in 5 years. It won't be easy, I warned. You'll have to give up a lot of luxuries. I think I'm ready for that, she said. I'm tired of pretending. As I was leaving, Preston approached me in the driveway. Beatrice. Mrs. Callahan. I owe you an apology. Yes, you do. I misjudged you. I thought, well, it doesn't matter what I thought, I was wrong. Yes, you were. But more importantly, you've been wrong about what matters in life. Money isn't everything, Preston. Neither is status. I'm beginning to understand that. He hesitated. The mortgage payments. We'll make them. Every month on time. I know you will, because if you don't, I won't hesitate to protect my investment. He nodded. Understood, and thank you for the wake-up call. Sometimes the best gifts come in unexpected packages. As I drove away, I saw Adelaide waving from her bedroom window, still wearing the antique pearls. I had a feeling she'd never take them off. A week later, I received the first mortgage payment. It was accompanied by a handwritten note from Mallory. Thank you for teaching us what really matters. Love, your daughter. I deposited the check and made a note in my ledger. Business was business after all. But family. Family was something else entirely. Over the next few months, I watched as Preston and Mallory transformed their lives. The parties stopped. The designer purchases ended. Mallory started shopping at regular stores and even learned to cook proper meals instead of ordering gourmet takeout every night. Preston took on extra consulting work to boost their income. And something unexpected happened. As they stripped away the pretense and faced their challenges together, their marriage actually grew stronger. They started having real conversations instead of performances. They discovered, to their surprise, that they actually liked each other better without the facade. Adelaide blossomed too. Free from the pressure to maintain appearances, she focused on her studies and her true interests. She joined the robotics club instead of the socially appropriate tennis team. She wore the antique pearls everywhere, telling anyone who asked about their history and her amazing gran. 6 months after that Christmas, I received an invitation to Sunday dinner. Not a formal party, not a catered event, just dinner. When I arrived, I found Adelaide and Mallory in the kitchen, attempting to recreate my breakfast casserole. The house felt different, warmer, more lived in, less like a showpiece and more like a home. We sold the marble lions, Preston told me over dinner. Used the money to pay down credit card debt. And I returned most of my designer wardrobe, Mallory added. Did you know some stores give you store credit even after 6 months? I smiled. I'm proud of you both. After dinner, as Adelaide cleared the table, a chore she now did without complaint, Preston sat down across from me. Beatrice, I've been thinking. Would you consider selling the mortgage back to us? Why would I do that? Because we want to refinance with a regular bank. We've improved our credit score, paid down our other debts. We can qualify for a conventional mortgage now. And we want to do this properly. Not because we're forced to, but because it's the right thing to do. I studied him. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something more genuine. I'll consider it, on one condition. Name it. The blue guest room remains mine whenever I visit. No more couches. He laughed. A real laugh, not the polished society chuckle I'd grown used to. Deal. Though I have to warn you, Mallory's talking about painting it green. As long as it has a proper bed and a door that closes, she can paint it purple for all I care. A year after that Christmas, I sold the mortgage back to Preston and Mallory. They refinanced with a credit union at a reasonable rate. They were still in the same house, but they'd learned to live within its means rather than beyond them. At Adelaide's 17th birthday dinner, a homemade affair with a cake Mallory baked herself, my granddaughter raised her glass. To Gran, she said, who taught us that the best things in life aren't things at all. As everyone clinked glasses, I caught Mallory's eye. She mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded. Some lessons have to be learned the hard way, but the important thing is that they're learned. And sometimes the best gift you can give your children isn't money or comfort or even approval. Sometimes it's the gift of consequences, delivered with love, wrapped in truth, and tied with the unbreakable ribbon of family. Looking around that table, at Preston actually engaged in conversation instead of checking his phone, at Mallory laughing without calculating who might be impressed, at Adelaide confident in her own worth, I knew I'd made the right choice. The couch? It's still in the den. But now when I visit, it's just another piece of furniture, not a symbol of misplaced priorities. And the blue guest room, now painted a lovely sage green, is always ready for Gran. Some might say I was harsh. Others might call it tough love. I call it the most expensive Christmas gift I ever gave. $1. $4 million to save my family from themselves. Worth every penny. The morning after I revealed that I owned their mortgage, the atmosphere in the house had shifted dramatically. Gone. was the artificial politeness that had characterized our previous interactions. In its place was a raw, uncomfortable tension that seemed to seep into every corner of the colonial mansion. I found Preston in his study at 6 a.m., surrounded by bank statements and financial documents. His hair was disheveled, and he'd clearly been up all night. When he saw me in the doorway, he didn't even attempt to hide the papers. "Beatrice," he said, his voice hoarse. "I've been going through everything. We're in worse shape than I thought." I entered the room and took a seat across from him. "How bad?" "We owe $180,000 in credit card debt. The car payments are 3 months behind. Mallory's been taking cash advances to pay for Adelaide's private school tuition." He rubbed his face with both hands. "I had no idea she was hiding this, much from me." "And you were hiding the mortgage situation from her?" He nodded miserably. "We've been lying to each other for years, trying to maintain this facade." "The first step is honesty," I said, "with each other and with yourselves." That afternoon, I called a family meeting, not the kind of staged family gatherings they usually had, with catered food and carefully curated conversation topics. This was different. We sat around the kitchen table with cups of coffee and a plate of store-bought cookies, a far cry from the imported delicacies they usually served. Mallory had been crying. Her perfectly applied makeup was smudged, and for the first time in years, she looked like my daughter again, not the polished society wife she'd been pretending to be. "I want to start," she said, her voice trembling. "I need to tell you all something. Last year, I took out a personal loan for $50,000. I told the bank it was for home improvements, but I used it to buy jewelry. Jewelry I wore once to impress Preston's colleagues and then hid in my closet." Preston stared at her. "Mallory?" "I'm not finished. I also opened 3 credit cards in my name alone. They're all maxed out. I've been moving money between them, paying minimums, just trying to keep up appearances." The room fell silent. Even Adelaide seemed to grasp the gravity of the situation. "My turn," Preston said finally. "I was passed over for partnership at the firm. That bonus I've been talking about for months, it's never coming. I've been pretending to go to client meetings when actually I've been driving to the park and sitting in my car, sending fake emails about deals that don't exist." The confessions continued for an hour. Each revelation was more shocking than the last. They had been living so far beyond their means that they'd created an elaborate web of lies to sustain it. Finally, Adelaide spoke up. "I know about the college fund." Both parents turned to her in surprise. "What about it, sweetie?" Mallory asked. "I know you emptied it last year. I heard you on the phone with the bank. You said it was for my SAT prep courses. But I saw the charges. They were from Nordstrom and Saks." Mallory burst into fresh tears. "Oh, Adelaide, I'm so sorry. I was going to replace it, I swear. I needed a dress for the Gardener's Charity Gala, and then I saw these shoes and—" "Stop," I said firmly. "This ends now. All of it." Over the next several hours, we worked together to create a complete financial inventory. Every debt, every loan, every credit card was laid bare on the kitchen table. The total was staggering: $447,000 in various debts, not including the mortgage. "We're going to need to sell the house," Preston said quietly. "No," I said. "Not yet. The house has equity, and in this market, you might break even after all the debts are paid. But then what? You'll have bad credit, no savings, and nowhere to live. That's not a solution." "Then what do you suggest?" Mallory asked. "First, we create a realistic budget, not the fantasy one you've been pretending to follow, but a real one based on Preston's actual income." "But his salary alone isn't enough to maintain—" "Exactly. So, Mallory, you're going back to work." My daughter looked stunned. "But I haven't worked in 15 years. Who would hire me?" "You have a degree in marketing. You were excellent. At your job before you decided being a society wife was a full-time occupation. You'll update your resume and start applying. But what about my committees, my volunteer work? Your volunteer work consists of planning parties for other wealthy people who are probably just as broke as you are. It's time to get a real job. We spent the rest of the day creating a plan. Every unnecessary expense was cut. The country club membership, the luxury car leases, the housekeeper, the gardener, all gone. We kept only the essentials. But what will people think? Mallory wailed as we canceled her spa membership. They'll think what they want, I said, and most of them are probably in the same situation you are, just better at hiding it. That evening, as I helped Adelaide with her homework, something her parents hadn't done in years because they'd hired tutors for everything, she asked me a question that broke my heart. Gran, are we poor now? I put down the algebra textbook and looked at her. No, sweetheart, you're just living within your means for the first time. There's a difference between being poor and being responsible. Will I have to leave Winfield Academy? Winfield was her exclusive private school, where tuition ran $40,000 a year. What would you think about going to Lincoln High instead? She bit her lip. The public school? It's one of the best public schools in the state. And with the money your parents save on tuition, they could actually start rebuilding your college fund. Some of my friends go to Lincoln, she said thoughtfully. Sarah Chen says they have an amazing robotics program. They do. And Sarah seems like a nice girl. Yeah, she doesn't care about designer labels or who has the biggest house. She's just real. I smiled. Maybe it's time you had more real friends. The next morning, Mallory had her first job interview in 15 years. She was terrified. I found her in the bathroom, having a panic attack. I can't do this, she gasped. What if they ask about the gap in my resume? What if they Google me and see all those society photos? I handed her a glass of water. Then you tell them the truth. You took time off to raise your daughter, and now you're ready to return to work. Period. But, Mallory, you once created marketing campaigns that increased sales by 30% for a major retailer. You're talented. You just forgot that somewhere between the charity galas and the designer handbags. The interview was at a mid-sized marketing firm downtown. Not the prestigious agency she might have once aspired to, but a solid company with good benefits. She came home 3 hours later, exhausted but oddly excited. They offered me a position, she said, sinking onto the couch, the same couch I'd slept on for a week. Junior account manager. The salary is, well, it's not what Preston makes, but it's decent. That's wonderful, I said. They want me to start Monday. I'll need to buy some appropriate work clothes. I raised an eyebrow. From Target, she added quickly. Or maybe that consignment shop on Maple Street. That weekend we held a yard sale. Preston initially resisted, but when I pointed out that selling their excess possessions could raise several $1,000s toward their debts, he relented. We dragged out designer handbags, barely worn shoes, expensive watches, and electronics that had been used once and forgotten. Mallory winced as she priced her Hermes scarves and Chanel jackets. Do we really have to sell everything? She asked, clutching a pair of Louboutin heels. Keep what you need, I said. But ask yourself, do you need 8 pairs of $1,200 shoes, or do you need to pay your daughter's school fees? She reluctantly put a price tag on the shoes. The yard sale was a revelation. Neighbors came, many of whom had always seemed intimidated by the Blackwoods' obvious wealth. As they picked through the designer goods, conversations started. We're downsizing, Mallory said, her new mantra, trying to live more simply. To her surprise, several neighbors confessed they were doing the same. The Hendersons had just sold their boat. The Patels were considering moving to a smaller house. The Washingtons had canceled their country club membership months ago. I thought, We were the only ones struggling, Mallory whispered to me. Everyone's struggling, I replied. Some people are just better at pretending they're not. By the end of the day, we'd raised $8,000. Preston seemed genuinely impressed. I can't believe people paid that much for our old stuff, he said, counting the cash. It's not old stuff, dear, I reminded him. It's thousands of dollars of barely used luxury goods that you bought to impress people who don't matter. Adelaide, who had been manning the cash box, piped up. Can we use some of this money to fix my bike? The chain's been broken for months. Her parents exchanged guilty looks. They'd been so focused on maintaining appearances that they'd neglected basic things like their daughter's bicycle. Of course, sweetie, Preston said. In fact, why don't we go to the bike shop together this afternoon? I can't remember the last time we did something just the two of us. As they left, Mallory turned to me. I've been a terrible mother, haven't I? You've been a distracted mother, I corrected, but it's not too late to change that. Over the following weeks, the transformation continued. Mallory started her new job and discovered she still had a talent for marketing. Preston, freed from the pressure of maintaining a false image, actually started performing better at work. Without the stress of constant financial deception, he landed a genuine new client. Adelaide transferred to Lincoln High and, to everyone's surprise, thrived. She joined the robotics club, made new friends, and seemed happier than she'd been in years. The kids here are so different, she told me one afternoon. They actually talk about ideas and projects, not just who has the latest iPhone or where. They're going for spring break. How are your old friends taking the change? She shrugged. Most of them stopped texting me when they found out I was changing schools. But you know what? I don't really miss them. The monthly mortgage payments to me arrived like clockwork. But more importantly, they were accompanied by updates on their progress. Paid off one credit card completely, Preston wrote on the second. Check. Got a raise at work, Mallory noted on the third. Adelaide won first place in the robotics competition, said the fourth. 6 months into our arrangement, I arrived for dinner to find them all in the kitchen cooking together. The dining room, once reserved for formal entertaining, had been converted into Adelaide's study space. The kitchen table, where they now ate all their meals, was covered with her robotics projects. Sorry for the mess, Mallory said, not sounding sorry at all. Adelaide's preparing for the state championships. Don't apologize, I said, examining a small robot that was navigating around salt shakers. This is wonderful. Preston was chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, a far cry from the catered meals they used to serve. We're teaching ourselves to cook, he explained. YouTube is amazing. Last week, I made beef bourguignon. It was actually edible, Adelaide added with a grin. We ate dinner together, and the conversation flowed naturally. No more forced discussions about social events or strategic networking. Instead, they talked about Adelaide's projects, Mallory's new campaign ideas, Preston's actual work. After dinner, as Adelaide cleared the table, a chore she now did automatically, Mallory pulled me aside. Mom, I need to tell you something. My heart sank slightly. What is it? I got promoted, senior account manager. It comes with a significant raise. That's wonderful. The thing is, they offered me a company car. Nothing fancy, just a Honda Civic. But it means we could sell the Range Rover and put that money toward our debts. I felt a surge of pride. 6 months ago, Mallory would have died before driving a Honda Civic. What did Preston say? He's already got it listed online. And you know what? He seems relieved. He hated that car. Only bought it because some partner at his firm said it was the right car for someone at his level. That night, as I prepared to leave, Adelaide hugged me goodbye. Thanks, Gran, she whispered. For what, sweetheart? For giving us our family back. I looked over her shoulder at Preston and Mallory. who were doing dishes together, laughing about something. The house felt different now. Lighter, happier, more authentic. "You always had your family," I told Adelaide. "You just needed to remember what was important." As I drove home, I reflected on the past 6 months. Yes, I had been harsh. Yes, I had forced them to confront uncomfortable truths. But sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable destructive behavior. My phone buzzed with a text from Mallory. "Made the mortgage payment early this month. Also, started Adelaide's college fund again. Only $50, but it's a start. Love you, Mom." I smiled and kept driving. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. It was about teaching them that the best things in life, family, integrity, self-respect, can't be bought with any amount of designer goods or social status. They still had a long way to go. The debts wouldn't disappear overnight, and old habits would occasionally resurface. But they were on the right path now, and that was all that mattered. 6 months earlier, I had purchased their mortgage to save them from themselves. Now, watching them save themselves, I knew I had made the right choice. Sometimes the most valuable inheritance you can give your children isn't money or property, but the tools to build a life of genuine worth. And sometimes, the best gift a parent can give is the courage to let their children fail, and then help them learn how to get back up again. The Blackwood family would be fine. Not because they were wealthy or well-connected, but because they had finally learned what truly mattered. And that was worth more than all the mortgage payments in the world. 8 months into our arrangement, I received an unexpected call from Vivian Blackwood. Preston's mother had maintained radio silence since fleeing back to Switzerland after learning about my mortgage purchase. Now, her crisp voice crackled through my phone with barely contained fury. "Beatrice, we need to talk about what you've done to our son." I settled into my armchair, sensing this would be a lengthy conversation. "What exactly have I done, Vivienne?" "You've destroyed him. Preston called last week to decline our invitation to the Blackwood family reunion in Gstaad. He said they can't afford the trip." "Can't afford it?" My son, talking like some middle-class person? This isn't funny, Beatrice. The Blackwood name carries weight in certain circles. Preston's behavior is becoming an embarrassment. To whom? To the family. He's selling his grandfather's Rolex collection on eBay. eBay, like some common pawnbroker. I remembered those watches. Preston had inherited 12 vintage Rolexes, but wore only one. The rest sat in a display case, gathering dust while they accumulated debt. Perhaps you should ask yourself why he needs to sell them, Vivian. Because you've poisoned him with this middle-class mentality. Bertram is beside himself. We're considering legal action. On what grounds? Undue influence, financial manipulation, elder abuse. I laughed, cutting her off. Elder abuse? I'm younger than you, Vivian. And as for financial manipulation, I legally purchased a distressed asset from a bank. Everything is documented and above board. You took advantage of their temporary difficulties. Temporary? They were 3 months from foreclosure. Where were you then? Where was your concern when your son was drowning in debt? Silence stretched across the international line. I thought so, I continued. You were content to watch, from afar as long as they maintained appearances. Now that they're facing reality, you're embarrassed. But this isn't about you or the Blackwood name. It's about Preston and his family learning to live authentically. You've turned them into ordinary people. No, Vivienne. I've helped them become honest people. There's a difference. She hung up without another word. That evening, Preston called. My mother reached out to you? She did. I apologize. She and Father are struggling with our new situation. How do you feel about missing the family reunion? He was quiet for a moment. Relieved, actually. Those gatherings were always more about showing off than connecting. Last year, I spent the entire week pretending to be someone I'm not, networking with people I don't even like. And now? Now, Adelaide and I are building a greenhouse in the backyard. We're growing tomatoes, real ones, from seeds. It's more satisfying than any business deal I've ever closed. The greenhouse project had started small, a weekend attempt to repair a broken window that had evolved into something larger. Preston discovered he enjoyed working with his hands, something the Blackwood family had always considered beneath them. Bertram would have a heart attack if he saw me in work boots, Preston had joked while mixing concrete for the foundation. Mallory had taken up sewing, of all things. It started with hemming her work clothes to save money on alterations, but she'd discovered a genuine talent for it. "I'm making Adelaide's dress for the Robotics Awards ceremony," she told me proudly, during one visit. The pattern cost $8 and the fabric was on sale. The whole thing will come to less than $30. "That's wonderful," I said, examining her careful stitching. "You know what's funny? I get more compliments on the clothes I make than I ever did on designer outfits. My colleague asked where I got my blouse yesterday. When I said I made it, she couldn't believe it. Adelaide had perhaps changed the most. Without the pressure to conform to Winfield Academy's social hierarchy, she'd blossomed into a confident young woman. Her robotics team had advanced to nationals, and she was considering engineering programs for college. MIT has an amazing robotics lab, she told me excitedly one afternoon. And guess what? They offer need-based financial aid. My grades and test scores are good enough. I just need to keep building my portfolio. That's fantastic, sweetheart. The best part? I actually have a shot at scholarships now. When I was at Winfield, everyone's parents just wrote checks. Nobody talked about financial aid or merit scholarships. It was considered tacky. Her voice dripped with disdain at the last word, and I had to smile. The girl who once begged for designer jeans now found conspicuous wealth distasteful. The transformation wasn't without its challenges. Old habits died hard, and occasionally the family would slip back into familiar patterns. One Saturday, I arrived to find Mallory in tears at the kitchen table, surrounded by glossy magazines. "What's wrong?" I asked. She gestured helplessly, at the pages. "The Winterhaven Ball is next month. We've gone every year since we were married. It's the social event of the season. And? And I can't go. I have nothing to wear, we can't afford the tickets, and even if we could, what would people say? Everyone knows about our situation." I sat beside her. "Who told you that everyone knows?" "Patricia Sterling. She called to ask if we were attending. When I said we weren't sure, she said she understood, given our recent challenges." She sounded so sympathetic, but I could hear her smirking through the phone. "Mallory, look at me." I waited until she met my eyes. "Why do you care what Patricia Sterling thinks?" Because. She struggled to articulate something she'd never questioned before. "Because that's our world. Those are our people." "Are they? When you were drowning in debt, did Patricia offer help? Did any of those people reach out with genuine concern?" "No," she admitted. But nothing. You're rebuilding your life. You have a job you're good at, a daughter who's thriving, a husband who's learning to be present. Why would you trade that for one night of pretending to be someone you're not?" She wiped her eyes. "When you put it that way." "Besides," I added, "the Winterhaven Ball costs $500 per couple just for tickets. That money could go toward Adelaide's college fund or paying off another credit card." She nodded slowly. "You're right. It's just hard sometimes, letting go of that life." "It's not letting go of a life, dear. It's letting go of a lie." That night, instead of attending the ball, the family had a movie marathon. Adelaide made popcorn while Preston set up the projector they'd bought secondhand. Mallory wore pajamas instead of an evening gown, and they laughed together at old comedies until midnight. "This is better than any ball," Adelaide declared, curled up between her parents on the couch. The next morning, Mallory's phone buzzed with society gossip about the event. She glanced at it, then decisively turned it off. "Not interested," she said when Preston raised an eyebrow. "I have better things to do." Those better things included her growing success at work. She'd landed a major account for her firm, a local organic food company that aligned with her family's new values. The campaign she developed emphasized authenticity over artifice, substance over style. "It's like I'm finally using my skills for something meaningful," she explained. "Not just selling luxury goods to people who don't need them." Her boss was impressed enough to put her forward for another promotion. This time, though, Mallory approached it differently. "I told them I couldn't take on more hours unless I could work from home 2 days a week," she said. "I need to be there for Adelaide." What did they say? They agreed. Turns out they value work-life balance more than the boutique agencies where I used to apply. Preston's transformation continued as well. He'd started a financial literacy program at Adelaide's school, teaching teenagers about budgeting and the dangers of lifestyle inflation. "You should see their faces when I tell them how much debt the average American family carries," he said. "These kids think credit cards are free money." "Like you once did?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "Worse. I knew better but chose to ignore it." The program was such a success that other schools invited him to speak. Soon, he had a side hustle as a financial education consultant. Ironic, considering his own recent history. "I'm thinking of writing a book," he mentioned. One evening. Riches to Reality, a former big spender's guide to financial freedom. That's quite a title. Too much? Not at all. Honesty sells these days. On the 1-year anniversary of my mortgage purchase, I invited the family to dinner at my apartment. As they arrived, I noticed the changes immediately. Gone were the designer outfits and luxury car. They pulled up in Mallory's company Honda, dressed in comfortable, practical clothes. Adelaide bounced in first, carrying a potted plant. "From our greenhouse," she announced proudly. "It's basil. We grew it from seed." Mallory followed with a homemade pie. "I've been taking baking classes at the community center," she explained. "This is my first attempt at lattice work." Preston carried a wrapped gift. "We wanted to thank you," he said simply. Inside was a handmade photo album. Adelaide had documented their year of transformation, the greenhouse construction, Mallory's first day at work, family dinners around the kitchen table, Adelaide's robotics competitions. The final page held a family portrait taken in their backyard garden. "We had it done by a photography student from the community college," Mallory explained. "She charged us $50 and got to use the photos in her portfolio." "It's perfect," I said, meaning it. Over dinner, they shared their progress. They'd paid off 3 credit cards completely and were ahead on the mortgage payments. Adelaide's college fund was growing slowly but steadily. Most importantly, they seemed genuinely happy. "We've been thinking," Preston began as we cleared the plates, "about the mortgage situation." My heart sank slightly. Were they going to ask me to forgive the debt? To reduce the payments? "We'd like to refinance with a traditional bank," he continued. "We've rebuilt our credit enough to qualify for a better rate, but we want to do it properly this time. 20% down, fixed rate, monthly payments we can actually afford." I felt a wave of relief and pride. "That sounds very sensible." "The thing is," Mallory added, "we'd like to buy the mortgage from you at fair market value. Not because we have to, but because it's the right thing to do. You saved us from ourselves, and we want to make it right." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her. The woman sitting across from me bore little resemblance to the status-obsessed socialite who had relegated me to a couch a year ago. Her designer highlights had grown out, replaced by her natural brown. Her nails were short and unpolished from gardening. Her smile was genuine, not performed. "I accept," I said, "on one condition." They waited anxiously. "The blue guest room, now. Green remains mine whenever I visit." Preston laughed. "Deal. Though I should warn you, Adelaide's been talking about painting it purple." Purple's my favorite color," I said. 2 weeks later, we finalized the mortgage transfer. They paid me exactly what I had paid the bank, plus a year's worth of interest. The check came with a handwritten note. "Thank you for the most expensive lesson we ever learned. Worth every penny. Love, Preston, Mallory, and Adelaide." I deposited the check and immediately wrote one for the same amount to Adelaide's college fund. It was, after all, her inheritance, just arriving a bit early. The last time I visited the house in Wyndham Hills, I barely recognized it. The pretentious marble lions were gone, replaced by Adelaide's robotics projects displayed proudly on the front steps. The formal living room had been converted into a workshop where Preston refinished furniture, another new hobby. The dining room showcased Mallory's sewing projects. But the biggest change was in the energy of the home. Laughter echoed through rooms that had once felt like a museum. Neighbors dropped by unannounced, something that would have horrified the old Mallory. Adelaide's friends from Lincoln High studied at the kitchen table, building robots and eating homemade cookies. "You know," Mallory said as we sat in the greenhouse surrounded by thriving plants, "I used to think wealth meant having everything you wanted. Now I realize it means wanting what you have." "That's wisdom," I replied. "Hard-earned wisdom. I'm just sorry it took almost losing everything to find it." "Sometimes that's what it takes." She reached across the small table and squeezed my hand. "Thank you for not giving up on us, for loving us enough to let us fail. You're my daughter. That's what mothers do." "Not all mothers. You could have just watched us crash and burn, or you could have bailed us out and enabled our behavior. Instead, you found a third way. The hard way. The right way." That evening, as I prepared to leave, Adelaide hugged me at the door. She was still wearing the antique pearls I'd given her that Christmas, now her most treasured possession. "Gran," she said, "I'm glad you bought our mortgage." "Really?" "Really. If you hadn't, I'd still be at Winfield, pretending to care about designer handbags and spring break in Cabo. I'd never have discovered robotics or made real friends or learned what actually matters." "And what's that?" She grinned. "Family, truth, hard work, and really good homemade cookies." As I drove away, I thought about the long journey from that Christmas when I'd slept on their couch to this moment. It hadn't been easy for any of us. There had been tears, anger, resentment, and more than a few heated arguments. But in the end, we'd all emerged stronger. The Blackwood family had learned that true wealth isn't measured in possessions or social status, but in relationships, integrity, and self-respect. They'd discovered that authenticity beats artifice every time, and that the best things in life really aren't things at all. And me? I'd learned that sometimes the greatest gift you can give your loved ones is the opportunity to discover their own strength. That tough love, delivered with wisdom and patience, can transform lives. 6 months later, Adelaide was accepted to MIT with a partial scholarship. At her graduation party, a backyard barbecue with homemade food and genuine friends, Preston raised his glass for a toast. "To Beatrice," he said, "who taught us that the best investment you can make is in your family's character." "And who showed us that sleeping on the couch can be a wake-up call," Mallory added with a laugh. "To Gran," Adelaide concluded, "who loved us enough to let us learn." As we clinked glasses, mismatched ones from the thrift store, not crystal, I knew that this was what real wealth looked like. Not the facade they'd maintained for years, but this. A family gathered in truth, bound by love, rich in all the ways that truly matter. The mortgage? It was just paper, a means to an end. The real value was in what it had helped them discover about themselves, and that was priceless. In the end, I hadn't just purchased their mortgage, I'd invested in their future. And the returns were beyond anything money could buy. 2 years after that transformative Christmas, I received an invitation that made my heart skip. The envelope was handmade, crafted from recycled paper with pressed flowers from Adelaide's garden embedded in the corners. Inside, careful calligraphy announced, "The Blackwood family requests your presence at our second annual alternative Christmas celebration." Below, in Adelaide's handwriting, "P.S. Gran, you get the master bedroom this year. We converted the den into a proper guest suite, but that's for Aunt Clarissa. She's finally coming to visit." Clarissa, Preston's fashion blogger sister, had maintained her distance during the family's financial reckoning. The woman who once photographed herself in $10,000 outfits had been conspicuously absent from family gatherings, claiming work commitments in Milan, Paris, and New York. Now, apparently, she was ready to face her brother's new reality. I arrived 3 days before Christmas to find the house transformed yet again. Solar panels gleamed on the roof, Preston's latest project after taking a course in renewable energy. The front garden, once manicured by a professional service, now burst with vegetables and herbs tended by the family. "We're saving $300 a month on electricity," Preston explained proudly as he helped with my bags. "And the tax credits were substantial, should pay for itself in 5 years." 4 years, 8 months, Adelaide corrected, appearing in the doorway. At 18, she towered over me now, her MIT sweatshirt covered in electrical burns from her latest project. I ran the numbers again last week. Inside, the changes continued. The formal furniture had been replaced with comfortable, second-hand pieces reupholstered by Mallory. Family photos covered walls once dedicated to abstract art that matched the decor. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and rising bread. "I'm teaching a bread-making workshop at the community center," Mallory said, pulling me into a flour-dusted hug. Who knew all those years of ordering from French bakeries would actually teach me what good bread should taste like? That evening, while helping prepare dinner, I learned about their newest venture. "We're starting a consulting business," Preston announced, chopping vegetables with practiced ease. "Financial recovery coaching for families drowning in lifestyle debt." "Like we were," Mallory added. "You'd be amazed how many people in Wyndham Hills are secretly broke. Patricia Sterling called last month crying. Turns out she's been hiding $400,000 in credit card debt from her husband. Are you helping her?" "Trying to, but she's still resistant to real change. Keeps insisting there must be a way to maintain appearances while fixing the problem." "Sound familiar?" Preston grinned ruefully. "Too familiar. That's why we're perfect for this work. We've been there." Adelaide set the table, mismatched plates they'd collected from estate sales, each with a story. "Mom's become kind of famous in the personal finance world," she said. Her blog post about our journey went viral. "From Prada to Prudent. How losing everything gave me everything that matters," Mallory quoted. 60,000 shares last month. Publishers are calling about a book deal. After dinner, we sat in the greenhouse, now expanded to include a small seating area, and talked about Clarissa's impending arrival. "She texted that she's bringing someone," Preston said, concern creasing his forehead. "Probably another fashion industry type who'll judge our lifestyle." "Let her judge," Mallory said firmly. "We're not apologizing for living authentically anymore." Clarissa arrived the next afternoon in a rental car, a sensible sedan, not the luxury vehicle I expected. The woman who emerged looked different. From the social media princess I remembered. Her designer clothes had been replaced with simple, well-made pieces. Her perpetual phone was nowhere in sight, but the biggest surprise was her companion. "Everyone, this is James," she said, introducing a man in worn jeans and a flannel shirt. "He runs a sustainable farming cooperative in Vermont." James had calloused hands and an easy smile. Within minutes, he and Preston were deep in conversation about solar energy and organic gardening. Clarissa watched them with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Genuine contentment. "You look different," I told her as we prepared guest rooms. She laughed, a real laugh, not the practiced tinkle she used to affect. "I am different. Want to know a secret? I was broke 2 years ago, completely maxed out, living on credit cards, faking a lifestyle for Instagram likes. What changed? Preston called me after your mortgage revelation. Told me about your family's transformation. At first I was horrified. Thought you'd all lost your minds. But then my credit cards started getting declined, and I had to face reality." She folded a quilt Mallory had made from Adelaide's outgrown clothes. "I sold everything, moved to a tiny apartment in Vermont, got a job at a farm store. That's where I met James. He taught me about sustainable living, real food, authentic connections. And the fashion blogging? I still blog, but differently. Now I write about sustainable fashion, thrift store finds, making clothes last. My followers dropped from 500,000 to 50,000, but the ones who stayed are real people, not bots or people chasing empty dreams." That evening, the family gathered in the kitchen to prepare Christmas Eve dinner together. No caterers, no staff, just family, including James and me, working side by side. Adelaide made her signature rolls while Mallory crafted a vegetarian, Wellington for James. Preston and his sister collaborated on side dishes, their old sibling rivalry replaced with easy cooperation. "Remember that Christmas 3 years ago?" Clarissa said suddenly. "When Gran slept on the couch?" The room went quiet. It was the first time anyone had directly mentioned that night since the transformation began. "I was horrible," Clarissa continued. "I took the guest room like I deserved it. Never even thought about Gran's comfort." "We were all horrible," Mallory said softly, "living in our bubble of privilege and debt." "Speak for yourself," Adelaide interjected. "I offered Gran my room." "You did," I confirmed. "You were the only one who saw me as a person that week, not just furniture." Preston set down his knife. "I need to apologize. Properly. Not just for the couch, but for years of disrespect. The way I talked about your apartment, your car, your choices, as if living within your means was something shameful. We thought wealth was about displaying success," Mallory added, "not about building something real." "I used to mock people who shopped at thrift stores," Clarissa admitted. "Now my entire wardrobe is secondhand, and I've never felt more stylish." James, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "In Vermont, we have a saying, 'Rich is the person who needs nothing.' Sounds like you all learned that the hard way." "The expensive way," Preston laughed, "but worth every penny." After dinner, we exchanged gifts. The contrast with that long-ago Christmas was stark. Instead of designer watches and electronics, the presents were handmade, thoughtful, personal. Mallory had sewn everyone matching aprons for family cooking nights. Preston gave handcrafted cutting boards made from reclaimed wood. Adelaide distributed small robots programmed to help with household tasks. "This one waters plants," she explained, demonstrating a tiny wheeled device. "And this one can sort recycling." Clarissa's gifts were plants, hardy herbs and vegetables started from seeds, ready for spring planting. "From our cooperative," she explained, "all heirloom varieties. My gift to the family was a set of photo albums documenting their journey, from the pretentious mansion filled with debt to the authentic home built on real values." The final pages were empty. "For the next chapters," I explained. That night, as I settled into the master bedroom, insisted upon by the entire family, I heard laughter drifting up from the kitchen. Peeking downstairs, I found them all gathered around the table, playing board games and sharing stories. No phones, no social media, no performance for invisible audiences. Just family. Christmas morning brought a surprise visitor. Vivian Blackwood stood on the doorstep, her designer luggage at odds with the modest neighborhood that had evolved around the house. "Mother?" Preston stared in shock. "I thought you were in Switzerland." "I was, but I needed to see this for myself." She looked uncertain, vulnerable, emotions I'd never associated with the imperious woman. "Come in, Vivienne," I said, stepping forward. "There's always room for family." She entered hesitantly, taking in the changed decor, the lived-in comfort, the absence of pretense. "It's so different." "Different good or different bad?" Adelaide asked bluntly. Vivian considered. "Different. Warm. I expected to find you all living in squalor, the way Preston described your new life on the phone." "I described reality," Preston said gently. "We live simply now. Honestly. Your father thinks you've lost your mind. The Blackwood name, the legacy—" "The Blackwood name was built on debt and appearances," Preston interrupted. "I'm creating a new legacy, one based on integrity." Vivienne sat heavily on the reupholstered sofa. "I'm tired," she admitted suddenly. "Tired of maintaining the facade. Your father and we're not happy. Haven't been for years. We stay together for appearances, live in separate wings of a house too large for two people, attend events we hate with people we don't like." "Then change," Mallory said simply. "At my age?" "Gran did," Adelaide pointed out. "She changed our whole family's trajectory at 69. Vivian looked at me. "How? How did you know what to do?" "I didn't," I admitted. "I just knew what not to do, enabled destructive behavior. The rest we figured out together." Christmas dinner included an unexpected guest. Vivian, who hadn't cooked in decades, insisted on helping in the kitchen. She was clumsy at first, unfamiliar with basic techniques, but Clarissa patiently guided her through simple tasks. "I had a cook growing up," Vivian confessed. "Then staff after I married. I never learned basic skills." "It's not too late," James offered. "Learning to grow and prepare food connects you to life in a fundamental way." By evening, Vivian had flour in her hair and a genuine smile on her face. She stayed 3 days, sleeping contentedly in the converted den, helping with greenhouse, chores, and learning to bake bread with Mallory. On her last morning, she pulled Preston aside. I overheard their conversation while watering plants. "I'm leaving your father," she said quietly. "Not for another man. For myself. I want what you have here. Authenticity, purpose, family dinners that aren't performances." "It won't be easy," Preston warned. "The social fallout." "I don't care anymore. I'm 72 years old. How many years do I have left to live honestly?" She turned to me as she left. "Beatrice, I owe you an apology and gratitude. You saved my son. Maybe you've saved me too." "You saved yourselves," I corrected. I just held up a mirror. Spring brought new developments. Adelaide's acceptance. To MIT came with a full scholarship. Her robotics achievements and compelling personal essay about family transformation had impressed the admissions committee. Mallory's book deal materialized, with a significant advance that went straight to their emergency fund. Preston's financial literacy program expanded to 3 school districts. But the biggest change came in May. The family decided to downsize voluntarily, selling the Wyndham Hills house to move to a smaller, more sustainable property closer to Mallory's work and Preston's consulting clients. "We don't need this much space," Preston explained as we toured their new home. A charming craftsman with a large yard perfect for gardening. "And the equity will let us help other families in crisis." They established the Second Chance Foundation, offering interest-free loans to families committed to financial recovery. The first recipient? Patricia Sterling, who had finally admitted the depth of her problems and asked for help. Full circle, Mallory mused, as we unpacked boxes in the new house. From being rescued to becoming rescuers. The Craftsman House quickly became a hub for community activities. Financial literacy workshops in the living room, sustainable living classes in the backyard, sewing circles where Mallory taught others to mend and make clothes, Adelaide's high school robotics students building projects in the garage-turned-workshop. "You've created something beautiful," I told them during Sunday dinner, a tradition that now included whoever needed a meal and conversation. "We had a good teacher," Preston replied. "Remember what you said that Christmas? Sometimes the best gift is consequences delivered with love." "And wrapped in truth," Mallory added. "Tied with the unbreakable ribbon of family," Adelaide concluded. That summer, Vivian moved to a small cottage 20 minutes away. She volunteered at the community garden, took cooking classes with Mallory, and slowly built a relationship with her family based on truth rather than pretense. Bertram, still clinging to the old ways, remained in Switzerland, but even he had begun to soften, asking Preston for advice on simplifying his own complicated life. Clarissa and James married in a simple ceremony in their Vermont vegetable garden. The reception featured homegrown food, homemade decorations, and dancing under string lights powered by solar panels. No society photographers, no luxury cars, no performance, just joy. As I watched Adelaide head off to MIT that fall, driving a reliable used car, armed with practical skills and unshakable values, I reflected on the journey that began with a couch and a mortgage. Sometimes the hardest truths create the strongest. Foundations. The Blackwood family had built their house on sand, appearances, debt, and social pressure. It took losing everything to find solid ground. Authenticity, hard work, and genuine connection. The couch I'd slept on that Christmas had been donated to charity long ago. In its place sat handmade furniture crafted with love, surrounded by family photos that captured real moments, not staged performances. The mortgage papers I'd once held were framed in Preston's office, a reminder of the price of transformation and the value of tough love. But the real measure of change wasn't in furniture or finances. It was in the laughter that filled their new home, the neighbors who dropped by unannounced, the community they'd built through vulnerability and service. It was in Adelaide's confidence, Mallory's purpose, Preston's integrity, and even Vivian's late-blooming authenticity. 3 years ago, I had purchased a mortgage to save my family from financial ruin. What I actually bought was their freedom. From debt, yes, but more importantly, from the prison of pretense they'd built around themselves. The return on that investment? Priceless. As Preston often said in his financial workshops, the best inheritance isn't money. It's the wisdom to live within your means and the courage to be exactly who you are. And sometimes, that wisdom comes wrapped in the unlikely package of a grandmother relegated to a couch, carrying a secret powerful enough to change everything. Not her wealth, but her willingness to let those she loved face the consequences of their choices. That's the kind of love that transforms. The kind that says, I believe in who you could be enough to stop enabling who you've become. The mortgage was just paper. The real currency was truth. And that, as the Blackwood family learned, is the only wealth that really matters. 5 years after that fateful Christmas, I stood in the crowded auditorium at MIT, watching Adelaide walk across the stage to receive her engineering degree. Her robotics project, a solar-powered agricultural assistant designed for small-scale farmers, had won the university's Innovation Prize and secured funding for commercial development. In the audience, Preston and Mallory beamed with pride, their hands clasped tightly together. Beside them sat Vivian, her once perfect coiffure replaced by a practical bob streaked with natural gray. "That's our girl," Preston whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Mallory pressed a handkerchief to her eyes, one she'd made herself, embroidered with Adelaide's initials. I can't believe she's graduating already. I can't believe she's graduating summa cum laude, Vivian added, and with job offers from 3 sustainable technology companies. I smiled, remembering the tentative teenager who had once defined her worth by designer labels and social connections. The young woman on stage now exuded confident purpose. Her pearls, the ones I'd given her that Christmas, gleamed against her graduation gown, a bridge between past and present. The journey to this moment had been extraordinary for all of us. Adelaide's transformation from reluctant debutante to passionate engineer. Mallory's evolution from social climber to best-selling author and financial coach. Preston's reinvention as an advocate for financial literacy and sustainable living. Even Vivian's late-in-life awakening to authenticity and purpose. And me? The grandmother once relegated to a couch had become the family matriarch in the truest sense, not through control or wealth, but through wisdom and unflinching love. After the ceremony, we gathered at Adelaide's favorite campus cafe, a far cry from the upscale restaurants the Blackwoods once frequented. Over simple, delicious food, Adelaide shared her plans. "I'm turning down the corporate offers," she announced. "I'm going to work with James and Clarissa at the cooperative." "In Vermont?" Preston asked, surprised. "With your credentials? You could command a 6-figure salary at any tech company." Adelaide nodded. "I could, but that's not what matters to me anymore. At the co-op, I can develop agricultural technology for the people who need it most, small farmers struggling to adapt to climate change." "Will you be able to support yourself?" Mallory asked, then laughed at her own question. "Listen to me, still thinking like the old Mallory. Of course you will. You have no debt, practical skills, and a clear purpose." "And a tiny house," Adelaide added with a grin. "James and Clarissa are helping me build it on their property. Solar-powered, of course. 400 square feet of perfect efficiency." 400 square feet? Vivian's eyes widened. "Your old bedroom was larger than that." "Exactly, and I never used most of that space. This will have everything I need, and nothing I don't." Later, as we walked through the MIT campus, Adelaide linked her arm through mine. "You know, Gran, I never properly thanked you." "For what, sweetheart?" "For saving us from ourselves, for buying that mortgage, and forcing us to face reality. I didn't save you. I just gave you the opportunity to save yourselves." She shook her head. "It was more than that. You showed us what real wealth looks like, not through preaching but through living it. Your apartment was small but filled, with books and art that actually meant something to you. Your clothes were practical but well-made. You drove that old Honda because it worked perfectly well, not because you couldn't afford better." "Mindful sufficiency," I said. "That's what my mother called it. I wish I'd known her. She would have loved you, especially the you've become." That evening, we gathered at Preston and Mallory's home, not the Craftsman House, which they'd outgrown as their community work expanded, but a repurposed church they'd converted into a community center with living quarters upstairs. The main floor hosted financial literacy workshops, cooking classes, and neighborhood gatherings. The basement contained a maker space where Adelaide had built her first serious robotics projects. The garden, once the church cemetery, now produced fresh vegetables for local food banks. To Adelaide, Preston toasted at dinner, the first MIT graduate in the Blackwood family history. And the first entrepreneur focused on something other than making money, Mallory added. Adelaide raised her glass. To the mortgage that changed everything. We all laughed, but the truth in her words hung in the air. That financial document, a simple transaction between a bank and a determined grandmother, had indeed changed everything. It had stripped away pretense, forced accountability, and ultimately revealed the authentic family buried beneath layers of societal expectations and debt. The fall following Adelaide's graduation brought another milestone. Mallory's book, From Fur, Bankrupt to Beautiful, Our Family's Journey from Financial Disaster to Authentic Prosperity, hit the New York Times bestseller list. The memoir, unflinching in its honesty about their former lifestyle and subsequent transformation, resonated with readers across the economic spectrum. It's not really about money, Mallory explained during one television interview. It's about values. We were taught that worth came from possessions and appearances. We had to unlearn that before we could build something real. The book's success led to speaking engagements across the country. Mallory and Preston traveled together, sharing their story with audiences struggling with their own financial demons. They never claimed to be experts, just survivors with hard-earned wisdom to share. The moment that changed everything, Mallory would tell audiences, was when my mother bought our mortgage without telling us. She could have just watched us fail. She could have bailed us out without conditions. Instead, she chose the harder path, loving us enough to let us face consequences while providing a safety net with strings attached. The media dubbed their approach compassionate accountability, a term that soon entered the financial self-help lexicon. Their foundation grew, offering struggling families both practical assistance and the tools to rebuild their lives on sounder footing. Meanwhile, Adelaide's agricultural robot prototype evolved into a viable product. Working with engineers and farmers at the Vermont Cooperative, she refined the design for maximum sustainability and repairability. Unlike commercial agricultural technology, her robots were open source, designed to be maintained by the farmers themselves with readily available parts. Technology should liberate people, not enslave them to corporations, she explained during a crowdfunding campaign that exceeded its goal tenfold. Our robots help small farmers compete with industrial agriculture while using fewer resources and maintaining the health of their soil. Clarissa documented the entire process for her sustainable living blog, now followed by millions seeking alternatives to consumer culture. Her posts about right-sized living and mindful sufficiency drew readers from around the world, many disillusioned with the empty promises of wealth and status. Even Bertram eventually came around. After his retirement from the banking industry, he visited the Vermont Cooperative, ostensibly to see Vivian but clearly curious about the alternative lifestyle his son and granddaughter had embraced. I don't understand it, he confessed to me during that visit, watching Adelaide demonstrate her robots to a group of local farmers. She could be a tech executive, living in luxury. Instead, she's here, covered in dirt, working with people who can barely afford her technology. And have you ever seen her happier? I asked. He sighed. No, never. That's what confuses me most. She has nothing, yet she has everything. She has purpose, community, and integrity. Those are worth more than any luxury. Perhaps, he admitted. Vivian certainly seems transformed by this. Simplicity. Indeed, his former wife had blossomed in her new life. The bitter, status-obsessed woman who once criticized my modest lifestyle had become a community garden coordinator. Her designer wardrobe replaced by practical clothes suited to outdoor work. At 77, she had more energy and joy than she'd displayed in decades of privileged existence. I wasted so many years, she told me one afternoon as we planted fall bulbs, chasing approval, maintaining appearances, measuring worth by possessions. If only I'd had someone like you to show me another way. It's never too late to change, I reminded her. Look at you now. That winter marked another turning point. Preston received a diagnosis that shocked us all: early-onset Parkinson's disease. The tremors in his left hand, which we'd all attributed to his intensive woodworking, were actually the first signs of a progressive illness. The family gathered immediately. Adelaide flew back from Vermont. Clarissa and James drove down with their infant daughter. Bertram even flew in from Switzerland, his first visit to their community center home. "I'm not dying," Preston assured everyone during a family dinner. "Just facing a new challenge, like the mortgage crisis, but internal." His optimism was genuine, but tempered with pragmatism. He had already researched the best treatments, joined support groups, and made practical adjustments to his workshop to accommodate his changing abilities. "The irony," he mused, "is that our transformed life is actually better suited to this diagnosis. 5 years ago, I was a stressed, debt-ridden corporate lawyer whose identity was wrapped up in performance and appearance. Now, I run community workshops where my worth isn't tied to physical perfection." Mallory squeezed his hand. "And we have what matters most: community, purpose, and financial security built on reality, not facade." In the months that followed, the family rallied around Preston while respecting his independence. Adelaide designed adaptive tools for his woodworking. Mallory took over more of their speaking engagements. The community they'd cultivated surrounded them with practical support: meals, transportation, companionship. "This is what wealth really looks like," Preston told me during one of our walks through the community garden. "I'm facing a degenerative illness, yet I feel richer than when I had 3 luxury cars and a mansion." "Because you are richer," I said, "in all the ways that matter. Thanks to you. That mortgage purchase was the best thing that ever happened to us." I shook my head. "No, your response to it was the best thing. You could have fought me, resented me, found another way to maintain the facade. Instead, you had the courage to embrace reality." The 6-year anniversary of that fateful Christmas brought the entire extended family together at the community center. Clarissa and James with their toddler daughter, who already knew the names of every vegetable in the garden. Adelaide with her partner Elena, an environmental scientist she'd met at a sustainable farming conference. Vivian, now a fixture in the community, teaching older residents to grow their own food. Even Bertram, still ambivalent about their lifestyle but increasingly drawn to their authentic connections. The gathering was simple but joyful. Homegrown food prepared together. Handmade gifts exchanged with genuine appreciation. Music from a second-hand piano restored by Preston. No pretense, no performance, no debt-fueled excess, just family and community celebrating together. After dinner, Adelaide called for everyone's attention. 6 years ago, we were a family in crisis, she began. Drowning in debt, living a lie, treating the person who loved us most as if she were an inconvenience. I tried to protest, but she continued. "Gran, we put you on a couch when you had given us everything. We treated you as less than because you lived authentically instead of pretending to be something you weren't. That Christmas was our lowest point, but also the beginning of our salvation." She turned to Elena, who handed her a small wooden box crafted by Preston. "So it seems fitting to mark this anniversary with a new beginning." Opening the box, she revealed a simple ring fashioned from a coin that had been hammered, cut, and polished. "This ring is made from a 1952 silver quarter, the year Gran was born. A coin that had currency then and still has value now, just transformed into something new. Like us." She offered it to Elena, who beamed through tears. "Will you marry me? Not just to share our lives, but to continue building the legacy that Gran started, one of authentic living, mindful sufficiency, and unshakable values?" As Elena accepted, the room erupted in celebration. I found myself surrounded by the family I had once feared was lost to materialism and pretense, now grounded, purposeful, and genuinely happy. Later, as the celebration continued, Mallory found me on the porch swing. "Quite a different Christmas from that one, isn't it?" she said, settling beside me. "Quite different," I agreed. "Do you ever regret taking such a drastic step? Buying the mortgage, forcing us to face reality?" "Not for a moment, though I did wonder, at times, if I had overstepped." She shook her head firmly. You didn't. We needed that wake-up call. All of us. I look at Adelaide now. Confident, purposeful, about to marry someone who shares her values. And I think about who she might have become without your intervention. Another Mallory, trapped in the cycle of appearance and debt. You freed yourself from that cycle, I reminded her. I just provided the opportunity. You provided the mirror we needed to see ourselves clearly. That's the greatest gift anyone has ever given us. Inside, Preston had started playing the piano, his right hand compensating for the weakness in his left. Adelaide and Elena joined in, followed by Clarissa's clear soprano. Even Bertram, who once considered such informal gatherings beneath his dignity, sang along. You know, Mallory mused, if someone had told me 6 years ago that we'd be living in a converted church, running a community center, growing our own food and finding joy in simplicity, I would have been horrified. And now? Now I can't imagine any other life. We're not just happier, we're more ourselves than we've ever been. As we rejoined the gathering, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. That Christmas night when I'd slept on their couch, seething with resentment and planning my financial countermove, I could never have predicted the full transformation my mortgage purchase would catalyze. I had expected accountability. I had hoped for respect. But what blossomed instead was something far more profound. A complete reevaluation of worth, value, and wealth that rippled through 3 generations. Adelaide and Elena's marriage, the following spring, embodied the transformation completely. Held in the community garden, decorated with flowers grown by Vivian, the ceremony featured handmade dresses, locally sourced food, and music performed by friends. No lavish expense, no performance for social media. Just authentic celebration of genuine love. Something old, Adelaide said during the ceremony, touching the pearls at her neck, still her most treasured possession. Not just the pearls, but the values they represent. The wisdom passed down from Gran, who taught us that real wealth lies in knowing what's enough. Something new, Elena responded, gesturing to the agricultural robot stationed around the garden. Not just technology, but technology with purpose. Innovation that serves community rather than just profit. Something borrowed, Adelaide continued, indicating her ring. The silver from a coin minted in Gran's birth year, transformed into a symbol of continuity and change. Something blue, Elena concluded, pointing to the sky. The world around us, which we commit to preserving through mindful living and sustainable choices. As they exchanged vows, I stood with Preston and Mallory, watching the future unfold before us, a future built on the ruins of financial disaster, transformed through courage, accountability, and love. The couch that once symbolized my marginalization had long since been donated. The mortgage papers that changed everything were preserved in a simple frame in their home office. The massive house in Wyndham Hills now belonged to a family embarking on their own journey toward authenticity, guided by Mallory's occasional coaching. But the real legacy wasn't in objects or documents. It was in the values now firmly embedded in our family. Authenticity over appearance, sufficiency over excess, community over status, purpose over profit. I think often of that Christmas Eve, when I placed that phone call to my financial advisor, setting in motion a chain of events that would transform not just the Blackwood family, but an expanding circle of lives touched by their example. What began as a necessary lesson in consequences had become a multi-generational journey toward genuine wealth. As Adelaide once put it during a community workshop, my grandmother taught us that true prosperity isn't measured by the size of your house, but by the strength of your values. Not by what you own, but by what owns you. Not by what you accumulate, but by what you contribute. Words that might have seemed trite 6 years earlier now formed the foundation of our family's shared philosophy, a philosophy proven not just in prosperity but in adversity, through Preston's diagnosis, through financial challenges, through the inevitable difficulties that life presents. The mortgage? It was paid off in full, ahead of schedule. The final payment came with a note from Preston and Mallory. The debt is cleared, but the gratitude remains. Thank you for the couch that changed everything. And in the end, that's what it was. Not just a financial transaction, but a catalyst for transformation. A grandmother's tough love, wrapped in legal documents, delivered with unwavering conviction that her family deserved better than a life built on lies. They had found that better life, not in wealth as the world defines it, but in authentic connections, purposeful work, and unshakable values that could weather any storm. The greatest inheritance, after all, isn't money. It's the wisdom to know what truly matters and the courage to build your life around it. Even if that means starting over from scratch, facing uncomfortable truths, and sometimes sleeping on a couch that becomes the foundation for everything that follows. 10 years had passed since that Christmas when I slept on their couch. A decade of transformation, growth, and healing that had rippled outward from that single act of tough love, the mortgage purchase that changed everything. I awoke in the sage green guest room of Adelaide and Elena's sustainable farmhouse. At 79, I still rose with the sun, a lifetime habit that served me well in my later years. Through the window, I could see the Vermont mountains bathed in golden morning light, the cooperative's fields already bustling with activity. Agricultural. Robots, Adelaide's life work, moved efficiently between rows of organic crops, their solar panels gleaming. This annual gathering had become our family tradition. Each summer, the extended Blackwood family convened at the farm for 2 weeks of connection, reflection, and celebration. What began as a small family reunion had evolved into something larger, a summit of sorts for the growing community of families touched by the Blackwood Foundation's work. Downstairs, I found Elena preparing breakfast with locally sourced ingredients. Their 4-year-old twins, Bennett and Beatrice, my namesake, were setting the table with mismatched plates, each telling its own story of provenance and purpose. "Gran!" little Beatrice exclaimed, abandoning her task to wrap her arms around my legs. "You're just in time! Mama made sourdough pancakes!" "And Papa brought fresh berries from the North Field," Bennett added, his serious expression so reminiscent of Adelaide at that age. Elena smiled at me over the twins' heads. "Sleep well?" "Perfectly," I assured her. "Where's Adelaide?" "She's giving a tour to the Stevenson family. They arrived late last night." The Stevensons were the newest recipients of the Foundation's assistance, a family of 5 who had been on the brink of foreclosure after medical bills decimated their savings. Like so many before them, they had reached out to the Blackwood Foundation after reading Mallory's book and seeing Preston on a popular financial literacy podcast. Through the kitchen window, I spotted Adelaide walking with the family, pointing out features of the farm's innovative sustainable systems. The father looked overwhelmed but hopeful, the mother exhausted but attentive. Their children, initially subdued, were already gravitating toward the farm's animals, a universal language of comfort for the young. "They've lost almost everything," Elena explained, following my gaze, "but Adelaide says they have the right attitude. They're not looking for a bailout, just a second chance to rebuild properly." "That's all anyone needs," I replied. "That, and someone who believes they can do it." By mid-morning, the farmhouse was buzzing with activity. Mallory and Preston arrived from their nearby home, where they had retired after transitioning leadership of their community center to younger hands. Preston's Parkinson's had progressed over the years, but adaptive technology, much of it designed by Adelaide, allowed him to maintain his independence and continue his woodworking passion. The Stevensons, "Remind me of us," Mallory said as we sat on the porch, watching Preston teach the Stevenson children how to whittle, so resistant to accepting help, yet so desperately in need of it. "Pride is a powerful thing," I observed. "So is shame. Both almost destroyed us." She squeezed my hand. If you hadn't forced us to confront reality, I smiled. After a decade, Mallory still found new ways to express her gratitude. Clarissa and James arrived next, their cooperative's van filled with produce for the week's meals. Their daughter Flora, now 11 and already a passionate environmental activist, raced immediately to the barn to check on her favorite horses. Behind them came Vivienne, now approaching 80 but remarkably vital, her gardening expertise having earned her respect throughout the region's farming community. By noon, the last arrivals completed our circle. Bertram, who had finally sold his Swiss property and moved permanently to a small cottage near Vivienne's. Their relationship had evolved into a comfortable companionship, nothing like their status-driven marriage. He had found unexpected fulfillment in teaching financial literacy to schoolchildren, his banking expertise repurposed to serve rather than profit. As we gathered for lunch at long tables set up beneath the apple orchard, I marveled at the extended family before me. Not just biological relatives, but the ever-expanding circle of lives touched by the Blackwood Foundation. Former clients, who had become friends, neighbors from the cooperative, even a few journalists documenting the Blackwood model for sustainable community building. Adelaide called for everyone's attention, raising her glass of homemade cider. 10 years ago, my grandmother slept on our couch, she began, the familiar story now a kind of origin myth for our gathered community. That single act of disrespect, that moment of failing to see the true wealth before us, became the catalyst for everything we've built since. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the gathering. The journey was well known to many present, either through Mallory's book, Preston's workshops, or simply by being part of the community that had grown around their transformed priorities. We thought wealth meant appearing successful, Adelaide continued. Gran taught us that true prosperity lies in being exactly who you are, living within your actual means, and building relationships based on authenticity rather than impression management. She turned to me, her expression warm with gratitude. We celebrate not just Gran's wisdom today, but the courage it took to let us fail, to purchase our mortgage without rescuing us from the consequences of our choices, to hold up a mirror that reflected reality rather than the fantasy we'd constructed. The gathering raised their glasses. To Beatrice, they chorused. To consequences delivered with love, Preston added. Wrapped in truth, Mallory continued. Tied with the unbreakable ribbon of family, Adelaide concluded. The afternoon unfolded with activity across the farm. Preston led a financial literacy workshop for the adults in the barn. Mallory facilitated a discussion on authentic abundance under the shade of oak trees. Adelaide demonstrated her latest agricultural robotics to interested farmers. The children rotated through activities, gardening with Vivienne, cooking with Elena, animal care with Flora. I found myself drawn to the Stevenson family, particularly Sarah, the mother. She sat slightly apart from the group, watching her children with the hypervigilance of someone who had nearly lost everything. It gets easier, I told her, settling onto the bench beside her. She startled slightly. Mrs. Callahan, I've read your daughter's book 3 times. It's what gave me the courage to reach out. Please, call me Beatrice, and I'm glad you did. I feel so out of place here, she confessed. Everyone seems so together, so purposeful. We're still reeling, still trying to understand how we went from a comfortable suburban life to nearly homeless in less than a year. Medical bills? I guessed. She nodded. My husband's cancer treatment. We had insurance, but the deductibles, the out-of-network specialists, the experimental procedures. We maxed out credit cards, took out second mortgages, cleaned out retirement accounts. He recovered, thank God, but we were left with nothing except debt. And now? Now we're staying with my sister while we figure out next steps. The foundation is helping us negotiate with creditors, create a sustainable budget, re-establish financial footing. But sometimes I wonder if we'll ever recover. Not just financially, but our sense of security, our trust in the future. I recognized the fear in her eyes, the same fear that had haunted Mallory during those early months of transformation. "Look around you," I said gently. "Every single person here has faced that abyss in some form. The Blackwoods with their debt and facade. Vivian with her empty marriage. Even Adelaide, confronting the hollowness of the path set before her. What matters isn't avoiding the fall, but how you rebuild afterward." "How did you do it? Did you find the courage to purchase their mortgage? To risk your daughter's anger? Possibly forever?" I considered her question carefully. I loved them enough to let them face reality. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to shield someone from the consequences of their choices. "I'm trying to remember that with our children," she said. "They've lost so much. Their home, their neighborhood, their sense of stability. Part of me wants to shield them, pretend everything's fine. But the other part knows they need to understand what happened so they don't repeat our mistakes." Children are remarkably resilient when given the truth with love. Adelaide was 16 when her world collapsed. Now she's one of the most grounded, purpose-driven people I know. Not despite the collapse, but because of it. Because she learned early that true security comes from within, not from possessions or appearances. Sarah watched her children laughing with Preston, their earlier reticence melting away under his gentle guidance. I hope we can give them that kind of foundation. Not wealth, but values. Not things, but purpose. "You already are," I assured her, "by being honest about your situation, by showing them that worth isn't tied to possessions, by modeling resilience in the face of adversity." That evening, as fireflies illuminated the farmyard, the gathering transitioned from educational to celebratory. Tables were pushed aside for dancing. Local musicians, friends from the cooperative, played folk music on well-loved instruments. Homemade food and drink flowed freely, each dish representing someone's handiwork and care. "Remember when we thought celebrations required caterers and crystal?" Mallory mused, settling beside me to rest her feet after dancing. "And designer outfits worn once and forgotten," I added, "and guest lists based on networking potential rather than genuine connection." We watched as Adelaide and Elena twirled, their twins across the makeshift dance floor, their laughter rising above the music. Preston, despite his physical limitations, taught traditional dances to younger guests, his patience and humor intact despite his illness. Vivian and Bertram sat together, not touching but companionably sharing space in a way they never had during their marriage. "I keep thinking about that Christmas," Mallory said quietly. "How close we came to losing everything that matters. Not just the house or our credit, but our authenticity. Our capacity for joy, our connection to reality." "It was a near miss," I agreed. "No, it was a direct hit," she corrected. "We did lose everything superficial, and thank God for that. It made room for what's real." In the decade since their financial reckoning, the Blackwood family's transformation had rippled outward in expanding circles of influence. Mallory's book had sold over 1 million copies, becoming a touchstone for families trapped in the appearance debt cycle. Preston's financial literacy curriculum had been adopted by school districts nationwide. Adelaide's agricultural technology was revolutionizing small-scale farming across 3 continents. But the most profound impact was less quantifiable: the cultural shift they had helped catalyze around the meaning of wealth, success, and prosperity. Their story, raw and real, had given permission to countless others to step off the hedonic treadmill and redefine prosperity on their own terms. The next morning, I joined Adelaide for her dawn inspection of the fields. The farm hummed with the quiet efficiency of her robots, each programmed to care for the land with minimal disruption to natural systems. Sometimes I can't believe this is my life, she admitted as we watched the sunrise paint the mountains gold. If you had told 16-year-old me that I'd find fulfillment growing food and building robots in Vermont, you'd have been horrified. I finished with a smile. Completely. My biggest concerns were getting into the right college to meet the right people, to secure the right job, to afford the right lifestyle, to impress people I didn't even like. She shook her head at the memory. What a hamster wheel. And now? Now I measure success differently. Do my children know they're loved? Does my work serve something beyond profit? Am I living in accordance with my values? Those are the questions that matter. She plucked a perfectly ripe strawberry and offered it to me. This farm, the cooperative, Elena, the twins, none of it would have happened if you hadn't had the courage to hold us accountable. You give me too much credit. Not nearly enough, she insisted. Buying our mortgage was the ultimate act of love. Not bailing us out, not looking the other way, but creating a structure that forced us to face reality while ensuring we wouldn't be destroyed by it. We walked in companionable silence through rows of thriving crops. The morning dew caught the rising sunlight, transforming each plant into a constellation of diamonds. The foundation is helping 10 new families this year, Adelaide said after a while, including the Stevensons. They seem committed to changing course. They are. Like us, they need a second chance, not a bailout, but a structured path forward. We're helping them negotiate with creditors, establish realistic budgets, rebuild financial literacy. Most importantly, we're showing them they're not alone. That failure isn't the end of the story, but potentially the beginning of a better one. Compassionate accountability, I murmured, using the term Mallory had coined in her book. Exactly. It's the model you created for us, supporting without enabling, caring without cushioning, loving without rescuing. Later that day, the Foundation's annual strategy meeting convened in the farm's converted barn. Board members from across the country joined executives, staff, and client representatives to review progress and set priorities for the coming year. Preston, despite his advancing Parkinson's, chaired the meeting with characteristic wisdom and humor. His voice, softer now but no less compelling, commanded attention as he outlined the Foundation's expanding mission. 10 years ago, we thought we were creating a financial rescue operation, he explained. What we've actually built is a cultural change engine. Yes, we help families avoid foreclosure and bankruptcy, but the deeper work is in transforming their relationship with wealth, success, and well-being. Mallory picked up the thread. The families we work with don't just recover financially, they discover a new paradigm for prosperity. One built on sufficiency rather than excess, authenticity rather than appearance, contribution rather than accumulation. Reports from around the table confirmed their approach was working. Foundation graduates maintained financial stability at rates far exceeding traditional credit counseling programs. More importantly, they reported higher levels of life satisfaction, stronger family bonds, and greater community engagement. Our waiting list has doubled again this year, the program director noted. Word of mouth has become our primary referral source. Families who complete our program refer others in crisis. We need to expand, Adelaide suggested, not just by adding staff, but by training other communities to implement this model locally. The discussion continued, with decisions made by consensus rather than hierarchy. I noticed the Stevensons sitting slightly apart, listening with growing hope as they recognized their own situation in the stories being shared. That night, as we gathered for dinner, Adelaide asked Sarah Stevenson to share her family's story. Initially hesitant, she eventually stood, her husband's hand clasping hers for support. 6 months ago, we were hiding from creditors, she began. Screening calls, avoiding the mail, lying to our children about why we kept the curtains closed. We were educated professionals who should have known better, Yet we found ourselves drowning with no clear path to shore. Around the table, heads nodded in recognition. Reading Mallory's book was like seeing our situation through new eyes. Not just the financial crisis, but the mindset that created it, the constant reaching for more, better, newer. The unexamined belief that worth comes from possessions rather than character. She gestured to her children, now playing comfortably with the other youngsters. We want something different for them. Not financial hardship, certainly, but authentic prosperity. The understanding that enough is enough, that relationships matter more than status, that true security comes from resilience, not excess. As applause followed her words, I noticed Mallory wiping away tears. So much of Sarah's journey mirrored her own, the painful reckoning, the initial resistance, the gradual awakening to different values. The gathering continued late into the evening, with stories shared around fire pits as stars emerged above the Vermont hills. Stories of financial crisis and recovery, of values rediscovered and priorities reordered, of communities rebuilt on foundations of genuine connection rather than competition and consumption. I sat with Preston, his tremor more pronounced after a long day, but his spirit undimmed. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked, gesturing to the gathered community. "When you bought our mortgage, did you envision all of this?" "Not remotely," I admitted. "I just wanted you to face reality before it destroyed you. Instead, it transformed us. You transformed yourselves. When faced with crisis, you chose the harder path, honest reckoning rather than continued denial. Because you showed us another way." He looked out at his daughter, now teaching the Stevenson children about the night sky. "Adelaide will carry this forward, and her children after her. You've created a legacy that extends far beyond financial wisdom." "A legacy of compassionate accountability," I suggested. "Of courage in love," he amended. "The courage to let those you care about face consequences, the wisdom to create structure around that reckoning, and the patience to watch transformation unfold at its own pace." The following morning, as I prepared to depart, returning to my own small home, now located in a cooperative housing community for seniors near the farm, Adelaide presented me with a gift. It was a small wooden box, crafted by Preston despite his trembling hands. Inside lay a key, attached to a handmade leather keychain, stamped with a simple phrase, "The door that changed everything." "We found it," Adelaide explained. "The key to our old house in Wyndham Hills, the one you bought the mortgage for. It was in a box of memorabilia from that time." I turned the key over in my palm, feeling its weight and history. "I'm surprised you kept it." "I'm glad we did. It reminds us where we came from. Not just the house, but the mindset. The prison we had built for ourselves. A beautiful prison of appearance and debt, but a prison nonetheless." She closed my fingers around the key. "We wanted you to have it. As a reminder of the door you helped us unlock. Not just the door to financial freedom, but to authentic living." As I drove away from the farm, that key nestled in my pocket, I reflected on the journey that began with a couch and a mortgage, a journey none of us could have predicted or designed. 10 years earlier, I had purchased that mortgage out of frustration and love, hoping to teach my family a lesson about respect and financial responsibility. What unfolded instead was a transformation so complete, it had altered not just individual lives but an expanding circle of families seeking a different definition of prosperity. The road from that lumpy couch to this flourishing community hadn't been straight or easy. There had been resistance, resentment, setbacks, and tears. Relationships had required rebuilding on more honest foundations. Old habits had resurged in moments of stress, requiring patient recommitment to new values. But through it all, the Blackwood family had maintained the core wisdom born from that crisis. True wealth isn't measured in possessions or appearances, but in authenticity, purpose, and genuine connection. Financial health matters, not as an end in itself, but as a foundation for living aligned with deeper values. As for me, the grandmother once relegated to a couch had found my own transformation through this journey. What began as an act of tough love had become a legacy of compassionate accountability that would outlive me by generations. A ripple effect touching lives I would never meet through the expanding work of the Blackwood Foundation. Sometimes the most important gift we can give those we love is the courage to let them face reality. Not rescuing them from consequences, but creating structure around those consequences. Not shielding them from truth, but ensuring that truth is delivered with love. And sometimes, the most unexpected catalysts, like being made to sleep on a couch while in-laws enjoy the guest room, can trigger transformations far beyond what anyone could imagine. In the end, that mortgage was just paper. What mattered was the mirror it held up, reflecting reality rather than the comfortable lies we tell ourselves. The courage to look into that mirror, to see clearly, and to change course accordingly. That's the true inheritance worth passing on. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.